What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. I'm Nathan. I'm here with Spencer. You want to say hello?
What's up, Fanatics?
All right. So be sure to check out our Twitter. It's at the FF Fanatics 3. It's our most recent account, or active account. Check us out on YouTube, the Fantasy Fanatics. We're uploading our podcast there. Our link to that is on our Twitter. Also, check out our website, thefffanatics.com. We post our weekly rankings there. It'll be out on Wednesday. We post a lot of great content on there. What are some of the things we post on there? Run us through give them a little plug of what we have on our website.
All right, so we got weekly rankings. We got Boomer Bust. We got some hot takes featuring Mr. Hot Takes, who's also in the house tonight for the podcast.
He is in the house. We might get a couple of hot takes later.
We have some season tiers, and we have some season-long league winners.
As well as a trade forum as well.
Yeah, a little trade
Although that
forum.
is kind of like our Twitter. It's basically our Twitter.
Yeah, it's basically message us on Twitter if you don't have a Twitter, I guess.
We just passed 500 followers on Twitter. Massive thanks.
Yes, sir.
Big thank you to everybody who follows us. Share if you like our content, if you like our help, share. You got people in your league who like a fantasy podcast, like just listen to two guys talk about, fantasy football. Share it with them, see what they think. Well, we'd love to hear your feedback. What else you got for them? Where else can they find us? I think it's about it for where they can find us.
Yeah.
So for this podcast, we're going to run down through the games of Week 9. We're about halfway through the Patriots and Jets game right now as we're recording this. We're gonna recap each game, give you our thoughts, who to trust going forward, that sort of thing. What else we got for them?
Just some questions we have on the Twitter. And,
Yeah.
just Week 9 recap, I guess.
Yeah, we appreciate all the questions we got. A lot of people message us. They also comment. I think a couple of people commented, but most of them message us. We really appreciate it. So let's get started. So we're going to start by recapping this week's games. Where do you want to start?
All right, so Thursday Night Football, the Packers beat the brakes off the 49ers. Aaron Rodgers had 305 passing yards for 4 touchdowns. Aaron Jones only had 58 rushing yards, 21 receiving yards. Devontae Adams had an amazing game. 10 catches for 173 yards and a touchdown.
The wide receiver one.
Oh, yeah. And then Jerick McKinnon had 12 touches for 52 yards and a touchdown. Actually, 15 touches and 68 yards. Richie James had a really good game. 9 catches for 184 yards and a touchdown. So let's get to one of the questions is, can you trust any running back for the 49ers without Raheem Mostert? Week in and week out?
I think if you're in need of a flex, you can maybe go towards Jerick McKinnon, especially in a PPR format because he's their primary pass catching back. JaMychal Hasty had one good week. I think it was just filling in for McKinnon. They had talked about resting him. A lot of people thought that was smoke and that Hasty was really good. But then the very next game, they went right back to McKinnon. So I think you can kind of get off the JaMychal Hasty train and lean towards McKinnon. But if Mostert comes back, you're definitely starting him, and you stay away from all the other running backs there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the touches were 15-6.
In favor of McKinnon?
Yeah, and the snap count was 42-15 in favor of McKinnon. So we switched to the Packers side. Is there another Packers pass catcher you could start besides Devontae Adams week in and week out?
I mean, maybe Robert Tonyan at tight end. Maybe Lazard when he comes back. You really hope that they would have traded for Will Fuller. That didn't happen. Maybe.
What about MVS, who had 2 catches for 53 yards and both of them were touchdowns?
I mean, he's like a glorified Ted Ginn. He's a boomer bust. Maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks he's gonna have this kind of potential. But I don't think any of them are reliable starters. Maybe a flex play. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe Allen Lazard. He had a good first 3 or 4 weeks when he was healthy. Just can't wait to see him back on the field.
Well, let me hit you with a question. Richie James kind of came out of nowhere, kind of by, just everybody else getting hurt. Had a really big game. He was looked for a lot. Looked really explosive. If everybody else is out again, do you play them? And if people like Ayuk and Deebo Samuel come back, do you play him even with them back?
No. He had 13 targets this game, 9 catches, 184 yards, and a touchdown, which is amazing. but he hasn't had a catch all season prior to this game.
Yeah.
Not one catch. I'm not sure if he's had a few targets or not, but not one catch. With Debo and Brandon Ayuk back and healthy, I think there's no way that, maybe a waiver wire ad in a deep league. He's gonna be prioritized pretty high this week though. But no, I don't trust him. Do you?
No, if they come back, I don't. But I want you to one word answer real quick. Ross Drilley, Jordan Reed. Which one you got? Tight end. Reed or Dwelly?
I'd say Reed just because off the past what we've seen.
Okay.
I don't really trust either of them going for it either. Do you? Based off what we saw Thursday?
Yeah, it's tough to say. If I had to lean one, I'd probably go Reed. So let's move on to the Broncos and Falcons.
All right. Is Drew Lock a fluke? He had 313 yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception. I think it was good for 29 fantasy points with 47 rushing yards and a touchdown. Prior to this, he hasn't really done much. Do you trust him going forward, or is this a fluke? Because he had a lot of points in garbage time. What do you think? I
do think it's a fluke. I think you're only playing him in a 2-quarterback league. I don't even think in a 1-quarterback league he makes it onto a bench. His weapons, he's really got Jerry Jeudy as his one reliable pass catcher right now. Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay are pretty inconsistent. There's not much running fantasy points coming from Drew Lock. I don't trust him. I think it's a fluke. Everybody has these games.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so Todd Gurley, is he moved into the range of touchdown dependent? Or, can you count on him just based off yards and volume?
No, you cannot count on him based on yards. He's been touchdown dependent the entire game, but he's actually been pretty good. I don't have it in front of me, but I think he's been borderline top 10 running back so far. Maybe
I think he's top 5 in rushing yards this year too. He has 19. He had 19 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown last game.
Yeah, well, Brian Hill, irrelevant, but I just think, I was mentioning this in the last episode, I think Todd Gurley is in such a good offense because we were comparing him to David Johnson. Which one would you rather have? I just think he's going to have plenty of opportunities to find the end zone. That's why I chose him.
All right. Can you trust any Broncos running back? Philip Lindsay or Melvin Gordon? Philip Lindsay had 8 carries for 23 yards. Melvin Gordon had 6 carries for 18 yards. Melvin Gordon caught 1 pass for 9 yards. Philip Lindsay got targeted 3 times but couldn't hold in a pass. Can you trust any of them going forward, week in and week out?
I think Melvin Gordon's definitely the better play. He's going to get more looks at the goal line. Philip Lindsay has looked more explosive as far as the big plays, but I think Gordon's more consistent.
All right. Is it finally Jerry Jeudy time? He had 7 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown. He had 14 targets. Is it finally time for Jerry Jeudy to emerge as one of those wide receiver 1s or wide receivers 2?
Well, coming out of the NFL draft, we had talked about who we thought was the best college prospect. You had mentioned CeeDee Lamb. I thought it was Jerry Jeudy. I think he's just uber talented. I thought he was the best receiver in the class. As far as fantasy perspective, I don't like Drew Lock throwing to him. I think he's going to get the volume, so I would maybe push him up to borderline wide receiver 2. Most likely wide receiver 3. I don't know. It's too inconsistent of an offense. I hate the quarterback. Not personally. Just I don't think he's a good quarterback. But as far as Jeudy, he's so talented. It would not surprise me to see him finish as a wide receiver 2.
All right. Now shifting to the Seahawks versus the Bills. How can you trust Tyler Lockett going forward? In the past 5 games, he's had 1 game with over 4.5 non-PPR points and 1 game with over 8.5 PPR points. And that was the 38-point performance with 15 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He just has not been reliable. You were talking about Ted Ginn earlier. He didn't really catch the deep passes like Ted Ginn, but he could put up the points like Ted Ginn. And then other weeks, he could have 30 yards. Do you still put him as a weekly starter? I think you got to.
I definitely do. I still think he's, low-end wide receiver 1, in my opinion. I think he's going to have a bounce back next week. They got the Rams. That means Jalen Ramsey's going to be on DK. It's going to mean a lot of attention is going his way, which means Lockett's going to be wide open. I think this is a Tyler Lockett game. I think he gets back on track.
I think we said the same about last week, too. I mean, Trey White was guarding DK. And, the Bills have been so bad against slot receivers this year. But Tyler Lockett, still only had 4 catches for 40 yards.
Well, this kind of goes into one of our next questions about DK he's matchup proof. He's unguardable.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if he's guarded by Jalen Ramsey or, Trey White.
Well, I think Jalen Ramsey will present a harder challenge because he's got more size and more speed than Trey White.
Yeah.
I prefer him to Trey White. That's a cold take. I think he's better than Trey White.
Oh, wow.
But, I just think Tyler Lockett is going to have a good game. I think the Rams know they're going to have to score a lot, and they're going to have to find some way to stop DK because otherwise, there's no way they're going to keep having these Russell Wilson 4 turnover weeks. That's just not going to happen, even with Aaron Donald.
No. He played definitely, I think, his worst game of 2020 so far.
Yeah, so in summary, start Tyler Lockett. Keep him in your line. There's no way you take him out.
Yeah. All right. Switching to the Bills side. Zach Moss had 9 carries for 18 yards. Devin Singletary had 2 carries for 1 yard. Can you start any of these running backs, going forward?
Well, you are the Bills fan, so let's switch that question to you. What do you think?
Well, they passed so much yesterday. I guess it was because the Seahawks, defense is so bad, but they were also bad against the run too. And what did they average? 1.8 yards per carry that game? I wouldn't start any running back. I prefer Zach Moss over Devin Singletary at this point. I think the Bills do too, based off of Singletary's fumbling problems in the past. But no, I don't think you can start.
If you have to play one, I'm playing Zach Moss. They drafted him for a reason, even with Singletary, so they obviously don't have complete trust in Singletary. So give me Moss.
All right, and do the Bills have 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers with Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, and John Brown?
Well, Diggs, you're obviously playing every format. Beasley's more of a PPR guy. He had a pretty quiet game considering they passed for about 1,000 yards. John Brown hasn't been too good this year. He's dealt with injuries, but he looked healthy. He looked pretty explosive. I would prefer John Brown to Cole Beasley rest of the season in standard format, and then PPR probably would take Beasley. But as far as weekly starters in a standard 10-team league, I'm just going to start Stephon Diggs right now. What do you think?
I would think Cole Beasley is superior to John Brown. Josh Allen loves Cole Beasley. Hitting him every third down, it seems like. In PPR and in standard, I would prefer Beasley. All right, to the Bears, the Titans. Is David Montgomery still a fantasy starter for you? He had a very, very mediocre game with 14 carries for 30 yards. And
he did have a concussion, so let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
That may have contributed to the lack of stats, but
when did he exit? Do you know?
I want to say it was the fourth quarter. I didn't watch that game entirely. I think it was the fourth quarter. Don't quote me on it. But anyways, assuming
he still had 17 touches for 42 yards. Before he had the concussion, he was just bad.
It's not very efficient. He's never been a very efficient running back.
He's just valued off of volume alone.
Yeah, I value him about running back 2 or running back 3. He's still going to get the volume in PPR, unlike last year, just because Cohen's out. But yeah, I think you can still start him just because he's the main guy in that backfield.
See, I disagree with you. I don't think you can start him anymore. That Bears offense is just so dreadful. They're not moving down the field. I think he's kind of in the same boat as a Todd Gurley.
Just in a worse situation.
Yeah, touchdown dependent. If knowing David Montgomery's not going to score a touchdown, would you start him that week?
Well, I don't think there's many running backs that if you knew they weren't going to score a touchdown that you would start. That are going to get you 100 yards. But for that question, if you knew he wasn't going to score a touchdown, then no, I would not. I think you're starting him based on the percentage he's going to score a touchdown.
All right. Is this an overreaction? Jonnu Smith is no longer a top 5 fantasy football tight end.
I don't think it's an overreaction, but I don't think he's far off. Just because the tight end group is so slim. We've hit on this in the past podcast, but the tight end position is so weak. It doesn't take much for him to get back into that conversation just because he's so explosive.
Who would you rather have, T.J. Hockenson or Jonnu Smith?
I take Hawkinson just because he's a bigger part of that offense. He's getting more touchdown looks than Johnny Smith, but Johnny Smith has that big playability in comparison to Hawkinson.
All right. Another question we had is A.J. Brown finally a wide receiver one?
I don't think so. I mean, he's been good, but I'm just not ready to put him there. If so, he's very low end wide receiver one, but you're definitely starting him every week, every format. He's their main guy in the passing game. What you worry about is Derrick Henry dominates and they get up big and don't pass the ball. But in most, I'd say probably 80-90% of the games, they're going to throw the ball, and A.J. Brown's going to be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's scored a touchdown in every game except one, and that was week 1 versus Denver. He's had 6 touchdowns in the past 5 weeks, so he has been a touchdown machine this year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the Ravens versus the Colts. Lamar Jackson struggled mightily. 170 yards passing, 58 rushing, 1 touchdown. Are you starting him every week? I mean, I think you have to. You draft him in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah,
lowest.
I mean, in our draft, he was gone in the 1st round. You got to start him unless you were lucky enough to pick up somebody like a Justin Herbert. I think you still start him just off the running potential. I think he's going to get better. Hollywood Brown has been kind of unhappy. I think they may try and feed him more to get him included. But, I'm still starting Lamar.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any way around it.
QB 13 this year. Just such a disappointment.
Who do you think is the Ravens running back with Mark Ingram back? Who would you take?
I love J.K. Dobbins. I loved him coming out of Ohio State. It just seems like they have this weird obsession with Gus Edwards, though, and I don't think Gus Edwards is very good. With Mark Ingram back, I don't think you could trust any of them, though.
I'd stay away. Unless you're in a deep league, maybe a PPR league, slip Dobbins in your lineup. But other than that, I'd probably stay away from all of them.
Yeah,
Their lead running back is Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a pretty good dynasty pickup, though. I love J.K. Dobbins in dynasty leagues. Is Hollywood Brown droppable? He said earlier in the week that he was frustrated with his role, and this game certainly did not help that. 3 catches for 38 yards.
Well, I think for that very reason, he's not droppable because, he's come out, he's been public about it. He's probably going to want more opportunity, and I think they're going to give it to him. I mean, from what you've seen so far, their offense has been kind of shaky, aside from Mark Andrews, who's been shaky as well. Mainly due to Lamar Jackson, but I think they're gonna start pumping the ball towards Hollywood Brown more, taking more shots down the field.
All right, Jordan Wilkins outtouched Jonathan Taylor once again, 13-8. Is Jonathan Taylor still a weekly starter for you?
This is tough because I think there's some injury problems going on here. Mr. Hot Takes, Robbie, you have Jonathan Taylor on your team. You wanna pop in real quick and give it there's a shake of the head no.
Yeah, he does not want to.
All right, well, I'll just ask him, are you starting him next week? He is the guy who came out and said Jonathan Taylor's a top 5 running back rest of the season.
He did come out and say that he was going to have a big week versus the Ravens.
So, what's that?
He did. He had a touchdown.
Yeah, he did. He did get in the end zone. Barely salvaged his week. But if he was on my team, it'd be really hard to trust him. Maybe I'd play him as a flex. What do you think? Would you play Wilkins or Taylor?
Oh, no, you're not playing Wilkins.
You don't think so?
No, I would much rather have Jonathan Taylor.
Even though
Jonathan
the touches
Taylor's the
are going
far
away?
superior, better player.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but he's getting less touches.
I still would take 10 Jonathan Taylor touches than 15 Wilkins touches.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Panthers and Chiefs. Christian McCaffrey came back, suffered a late injury, but while he was playing, he was an absolute stud like usual. What's your take on McCaffrey? Do you, stick with Mike Davis? If McCaffrey ends up playing, I think it's a shoulder injury. If he ends up playing, do you trust him enough to keep him in your lineup, even with the injury scare?
Well, Matt Rule came out today and said that he's day-to-day after injuring his shoulder on the last drive.
That's good news that he's day-to-day and not just completely
Yeah, they
out.
said his status is in doubt. They'll know more Wednesday after tests. So, you can't really go too into it. But, Mike Davis is definitely a top 10 play without McCaffrey
With
there.
him out. But I'm saying if they're both playing,
No.
do you still play
no.
McCaffrey?
You got to hold on to him just because the injury is going on with McCaffrey. But, no, you're not playing Mike Davis if McCaffrey's playing.
Okay, now you've dealt with this wide receiver conundrum the whole season on your fantasy team with DJ Moore. Out of DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and Robbie Anderson, A, how do you rank them? And B, who do you trust the most?
Robbie Anderson's the only one you could start week in and week out, I think. DJ Moore, I thought this would be the game for him. I thought Kansas City would focus on Robbie Anderson, and that would open up the field, in a shootout, which they did score 31 points. DJ Moore had 3 targets, 2 catches, 18 yards, while Curtis Samuel had 9 catches, 105 yards, and Robbie Anderson had 9 catches for 63 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't trust DJ Moore. The only reason he had, okay-looking numbers in that Falcons game last week, he had 2 catches. His only 2 catches came off the last drive of the game. No, I mean, you can't start DJ Moore with confidence. I mean, do you agree with me?
No, I agree completely. I think Robbie Anderson's the main guy there. Curtis Samuel, kind of interesting because I didn't see this coming before this year. He's been like a reserve running back, been getting touches, actually scored some rushing touchdowns. But like you said, Robbie Anderson's the guy.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row with 2 catches for DJ Moore. You can't trust that. I mean, he might go out there and have that 50-yard touchdown, but you can't count on that every week.
Now, how about Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Le'Veon Bell on the other side of the Panthers-Chiefs game? Weekly starters, and B, if so, who do you prefer?
I'm not starting them every week. I'm scared about starting them. Clyde only had a good game because he caught a touchdown. Besides that, he had 7 touches for 34 yards, 8 touches for 34 yards and a touchdown. Without that touchdown, it's a bad game for him. And Le'Veon had 4 carries for 8 yards with a catch for -5 yards. 3 total yards on 5 touches.
Yeah, it is super hard. The only reason I think you put them in is because simply they're in the Chiefs' offense. This just in, Patriots beat the Jets on a game-winning field goal. Celebrating beating the Jets, kind of embarrassing, kind of sad. Back to Le'Veon Bell versus Clyde. Yeah, I think if you lean towards one, it's Clyde. Le'Veon Bell just hasn't been getting very many looks as everybody thought.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game where it was relatively close the whole time. But, no, you can't start any running back from that Chiefs offense. I mean, you drafted Clyde likely in the top 6, top 7. But, no. Moving on to the Lions versus Vikings. Is DeAndre Swift finally taking over the Lions' backfield?
Well, you never know. I mean, it seems the older Adrian Peterson gets, the more carries he's getting. It doesn't really make sense. But
yeah, I mean, he out-touched him 16-8. Kerryon Johnson also had 7 touches.
Mm-hmm.
DeAndre Swift looks like the best back there.
Yeah,
There's no doubt.
think undoubtedly.
There's no doubt.
I think undoubtedly he's the best guy there. If you have him on your roster, you've kind of been waiting for this point to where he separates himself, and I think you're going to reap the rewards later in the season. Adrian Peterson is really old. Kerryon Johnson just kind of trash. But I think Swift will end up winning you a couple of games later in the season.
Yeah, he's a super talented player who just is in a running back committee. He's got to get out of there. Free DeAndre Swift. Can you trust Marvin Jones without Kenny Golladay?
I think absolutely. I think other than T.J. Hawkinson, he's their main guy in the passing offense without Golladay. He's a touchdown machine when Galladay's in there most of the time. And then without Golladay, it's even more so. So I think you can. Do you?
I've seen a lot of people hyping up Danny Amendola after a 7-catch, 77-yard game. Are you buying into the hype?
I'm not. Absolutely not.
He's had 5 catches once this year besides that, and that was week 1.
I think you fell for that last year.
Yeah, I picked him up. He had like 10 catches for 120 yards, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the next Julian Edelman. You know, the slot guy who's going to catch a crap ton of passes.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, that didn't happen. Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen?
This is a little biased. This is a little bias coming from me. How about you answer this? Because I have Thielen on my team, so I'm a big Thielen. Yeah, how about you answer this?
I would still roll with Thielen just because Thielen's so good. He's shown that he can be a top 5 wide receiver. Justin Jefferson is that big play potential, though. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Justin Jefferson outscored him from now on, and it also wouldn't surprise me if Adam Thielen, outscored him from now on either.
Yeah, the thing you're obviously worried about is Dalvin Cook having more Dalvin Cook games. I mean, he's an absolute freak. Number 1 player in fantasy rest of the season, in my opinion.
You think that's unanimous?
I think so. I think you'll see in our rankings. You'll see him in the ESPN rankings. You'll see him in probably every fantasy ranking you see. Dalvin Cook should be the number one player each and every week. He's matchup proof. He's an absolute stud. Give me him over Kamara. Give me him over Derrick Henry. Anybody, I'll take.
What about
Dalvin
Christian
Cook.
McCaffrey when he's healthy?
Yeah, I'll take Cook.
Really?
Cook. I mean, how can you argue with what
You
he's
think
done?
he's going number one in fantasy drafts next year? At this point, if you were drafting next year, which obviously you're not. We're in week 9.
That's tough. That's really tough because McCaffrey's a stud as well. The thing with Cook is you're drafting him knowing the injury risk. He's been injury prone his whole season, but when he's in there, my God, he's an absolute freak.
Are you buying into the Irv Smith Jr. hype?
I'm not. Purely because there's Adam Thielen, there's Justin Jefferson, and even more importantly, there's Kirk Cousins, who is so inconsistent. You know, he's getting towards that borderline trash, performance. He's an interception machine this year. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all.
All right, moving on to the next game, the Giants versus the Redskins. Is Scary Terry a wide receiver 1 with Alex Smith at the QB position?
Well, Alex Smith, thoughts go out to Kyle Allen. But Alex Smith, I think, is an upgrade as far as passing the ball. He was slinging it downfield. He's a former Pro Bowler, so I think Terry can be.
I think Terry is a wide receiver 1 with every quarterback besides Dwayne Haskins.
Really? I still think he's a high-end wide receiver, too, but I don't blame you if you put him in wide receiver 1.
He is an absolute stud who is the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL.
Free Terry. Get him out of Washington. Get him to another team.
Get him a good quarterback. Alex Smith might air that ball out to him. You could see Tyreek Hill had top 10 potential.
We shall see. Antonio Gibson. We talked about in the last podcast. I think he's an absolute stud. I think that next few years he's going to make his way into the top 2 or 3 rounds of the fantasy draft. What do you think about him week in and week out? Do you still trust him?
He had a great matchup versus the Giants. J.D. McKissick out-touched him, though, 12-9. I just don't understand what's going on in that Washington backfield that makes you think that McKissick is more explosive than Gibson. There's no reason J.D. McKissick should have 14 targets and Gibson should have 3. Gibson is the clear, better pass catcher in that backfield.
Clear, better runner as well. Everything.
What is going on?
You said free Terry. Let's free Antonio as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that need to be freed right now.
All right, Texans and Jaguars, what you got?
Is Duke Johnson a top 20 play without David Johnson?
I'm going to say no because...
What about PPR?
PPR, maybe. I'd maybe slip him right inside the top 20. He's just not much of a power back. I don't see him getting many touchdown looks. You're banking on his receiving ability. I just don't think you play him as like a running back 1 or running back 2. I think it's more of a flex play, honestly.
See, in PPR, I think he's a top 15 play. Just based off what we've seen with David Johnson. If he gets the same volume, I think he's a better pass catcher than David Johnson at this point. David Johnson was very elite, in 2016. He's just looked, slow ever since then after all those injuries and all that time off. Switching to the Jaguars. Is DJ Chark back with the quarterback change to Jake Luton?
Well, it's one game. You want to be sure not to overreact, but he looked very good. Luton looked really good.
He looked like the Chark we saw last year. He really did.
Yeah, and part of this might also be he's recovering from some injuries, but he did look very good. Luton looked for him a lot, and Chark's a beast if you can give him the ball.
He had 12 targets. I think the highest with Gardner Minshew in there. Mistake me if I'm wrong, but I think it was like 8 or 9, and that was a really good week for Chark. So if he keeps firing the ball to him, I think Chark's a weekly wide receiver too.
Well, let me throw you a layup because we know you're a James Robinson fan.
Oh, big James
absolute
Robinson guy.
Fanboy, has him on his team, won't stop talking about him. Is he a running back 1?
Top 6 running back going forward.
Wow, I disagree, but okay.
25 carries, wanting the ball. The one production wasn't there exactly like you've seen from James Robinson. He averaged 4 yards a carry. He also got in the end zone once. And, they were down for most of the game, too. They were trailing. So just think about the Green Bay matchup next week. Do you think he's a top 10 running back in that matchup because they'll be down?
Well, I think he's a top 10, but I want to go a little farther into justifying why he's a top 6 rest of the season. So, James Robinson or Alvin Kamara?
Alvin Kamara.
James Robinson or Derrick Henry?
Derrick Henry.
All right, so are you keeping track?
I'm keeping track.
You're keeping track of how many running backs we named.
We're at 2.
All right, how about Christian McCaffrey?
Is he healthy, though? I mean,
Assuming
top 7 with McCaffrey there.
Dalvin Cook.
Top set. So McCaffrey's like the borderline 6 or 7.
No,
Interesting.
McCaffrey, when he's healthy, he's top 3.
Okay, how about Aaron Jones? If you think about this, we should take up the podcast.
Aaron Jones.
Really? How about Nick Chubb?
Oh, give me James Robinson.
Oh, interesting. How about Raheem Mostert when he's healthy?
James Robinson.
Really? How about James Conner?
James Robinson.
Oh, I disagree there.
I think James Robinson's an absolute stud. Wasn't looked at at all when he was in college. Undrafted. He's had to prove himself all the way through. 25 carries, though. You can't. They were down the whole game, and he had 25 carries. He was getting fed.
How about Ezekiel Elliott?
Give me James Robinson.
Give me Ezekiel Elliott. Disagree on that one.
We can agree to disagree.
Okay.
All right. Off to the Raiders versus the Chargers. Are there any Raiders wide receivers you could start week in and week out? I think so far Nelson Aguilar is probably the best.
No. The answer to this question is no.
And
Their best wide receiver plays tight end. His name is Darren Waller. You don't start any receivers.
yeah, I mean Hunter Renfrow.
No.
That's even a reach. What about Henry Ruggs?
No.
So no on everyone.
No. Just a straight no. Absolutely.
Brian Edwards when he comes back?
No. Absolutely no.
I love
Nobody.
Brian Edwards.
Nobody. I mean, Henry Ruggs going to have the occasional big game, but no. Nobody.
All right. Is Mike Williams a sit it and forget it? Or set it and forget it?
Well, if he's healthy, I think so. I think he's wide receiver 2. He's huge. Makes some crazy catches.
Would you rather have him or DJ Chark?
Ooh, that's a good one. They're pretty similar to me, but I'd probably take Mike Williams just because of who's throwing him the ball. Herbert, I mean, coming from,
You're sleeping on
I mean, you know what, like,
on Jake Luton.
you know I like DJ Chark, but I mean, would you rather catch it from Jake Luton or Justin Herbert?
I think people are sleeping on Luton. No, I'm going to go Herbert. No doubt there.
Yeah.
Although I'm interested in that whole Jacksonville offense with Luton and how he played. I think he has some potential. So Steelers versus Cowboys. Steelers almost let that one slip away. Man, that would have been bad. That would have been bad. Is James Conner still on your... I mean, is he still a top 10 weekly running back? He had 11 touches for 20 yards.
Let's be sure not to overreact. He's been an absolute animal the whole season.
But he had a cake matchup against Dallas.
I mean, James Robinson's had a bad game. I think James Conner's allowed to. I mean, if you're going to hype up James Robinson, I think we can hype up James Conner. He's a good running back. They're going to feed him. This was a super fluke game. The fact that Dallas was even competitive in this game surprised everybody.
And they're throwing in Anthony McFarland and Benny Snell in there. I mean,
That was situational. That was purely situational.
you think so?
Yes. How about the Steelers wide receivers?
I go probably Juju, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool. I'm a big Deontay
Wow.
Johnson guy.
Well, Mr. Robbie himself, Mr. Hot Takes, is
fuming over there. He is a
perplexed.
big Chase Claypool guy.
We need to give this man some credit. He predicted the Chase Claypool breakout on the website. How do you feeling about that? A little heated?
He's smoking the load.
Yeah, that's a hot take in my opinion, coming from Spencer. I'd take Claypool
It's
first.
not hot. It's cold. It's cold as all hell.
Yeah, I'd take Claypool. Second, I'd probably put Juju and then Deontay Johnson. I think Claypool's he's too big, too talented, and Roethlisberger obviously loves him. So I'd bring him like that.
Nah.
Juju was a fluke this week playing against a terrible secondary in Dallas.
Then why did Chase Claypool not have that?
They might not have been able to hear that. It was saying that Juju was a fluke against this Dallas secondary. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that Juju was a fluke?
I mean, he's had the volume. It's just, like I said on last week's podcast, it's just been dump-offs repeatedly. I mean, if they can air the ball out to him, he's a great rack guy.
Well, that's exactly why I prefer Claypool.
The targets are there.
That's Claypool was even getting some rushing touchdowns on these sweeps. You don't see Juju doing that. So
No, the targets went 13 to Claypool, 10 to Deontay Johnson, and 7 to Juju. Another thing that I saw when I was watching the game, it felt like Ben forced the ball to chase it a couple times, too.
well, exactly. That's why I'm taking Chase Claypool. I think you're supporting my point. I'm not really sure, but that remains to be seen. But in
I would
summary,
take Juju.
let's give some credit to Mr. Hot Takes. He predicted the Chase Claypool breakout. I don't think many people saw that coming.
No. Has CeeDee Lamb returned to fantasy relevance with the shining Garrett Gilbert at QB.
Well, breaking news just came in. Andy Dalton will be their starter when he comes back.
What?
Yeah, Andy Dalton will be their starter. Just came in a little bit ago as we're
never
recording
mind.
this.
Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it.
I mean, what did they see that leads them to believe that
I mean, Garrett Gilbert had them in the game with the Steelers.
against Pittsburgh?
Against the Steelers.
They were leading with 2 minutes left
Yeah.
and drove down the field 4 plays, 55 yards. He had the chance to throw the game winner.
I
Do you
think
really think Andy Dalton could have done that?
I don't. I really don't. I think with Dak in there, Lamb was a wide receiver too. Now he's down, regardless of who's in there, as long as it's not Danucci. If Danucci's in there, don't play him. Don't play anybody. Just go ahead and drop all the Cowboys for that week.
Wow.
I think he's now flex play.
Wow, Andy Dalton over Garrett Gilbert. I did not know that. All right. Staying with Dallas, is Ezekiel Elliott a weekly starter?
Absolutely. I think this is a ridiculous question. I think he's absolutely. I think you start him every week.
The volume was there, just not the production, once
Well,
again.
He was playing the Steelers. I mean, you can kind of understand that.
I mean, the Steelers had an off game.
They did, but, I mean, Zeke's so good. He's way too talented, and maybe Andy Dalton gets that offense going. You still got to play him, regardless of where he's ranked, any of that nonsense. You play him.
You're playing him over James Robinson, correct?
Well, maybe not next week, because they got a kick matchup.
All right. Dolphins versus the Cardinals. Are any Dolphins wide receivers, can they be started
Yes.
from now on?
Yes, Devontae Parker can. Tua's going to improve. His first game, I think, was just growing pains. Devontae Parker, yes. Preston Williams is hurt.
Preston Williams.
He's
What a
hurt.
guy.
Yeah, big Preston Williams writer over here. Devontae Parker, yes, you can. In his absence, I think you boost Gesicki. I think he kind of steps up into that second wide receiver role. Even though he's a tight end, he basically plays wide receiver. The running backs there, complete cluster. I have no idea. Until Myles Gaskin comes back, I'd probably stay away. What's your thoughts on specifically the receivers?
All right, so you know I'm a big Colorado State 6'5" star Preston Williams fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he's healthy, are you starting him?
No.
I love me some Preston Williams. He was really good. He had 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Tua loved him. He's the big jump ball guy.
Yeah, but Devontae Parker's way better.
No, I don't disagree with that.
It's Devontae Parker.
All right, with Kenyon Drake out, can you trust Chase Edmonds? I mean, do you think he's a top 10 play?
I wouldn't go as high as top 10, but I do think you can trust him in your lineup. I'd play him as probably a running back 2, high-end running back 2 at that, and I do think you can trust him.
Yeah, the volume was definitely there last game. They loved them some Chase Edmonds. He had 25 carries for 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
He also had 3 catches for 18 yards, so 28 touches. That's a lot of touches for him. I definitely think I'd say probably top 12 play going forward.
I'm more around the 12 to 15 range, but I'd say high in RB2.
All right, coming off of a big game, Christian Kirk. Is he a weekly starter now? 5 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown.
No, I would not. If you're desperate, maybe put him as your flex if you're like dealing with some bye weeks or injuries. But I don't think so. I think he's going to have these weeks, though, where he goes nuts with a long catch. But I think those are kind of few and in between.
Yeah, you're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins only having 3 targets every
No,
game. That's definitely not going to happen.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen.
All right, is Kyler Murray a top 5 quarterback
Absolutely.
from now on?
Absolutely. I love Kyler Murray coming into the season. And now, especially with Dak being out, it just bumps him up even higher. I would only take Russell Wilson, Mahomes, and he's right there with like Josh Allen, the Aaron Rodgers. He's right up there above Deshaun Watson. So there's only maybe 3 people I take above him. So I think he's certainly a top 5 guy.
All right. On to our last game, Sunday Night Football, where the Saints beat the brakes off of the Buccaneers. Free Alvin Kamara. Latavius Murray is getting way too many touches in that backfield. I'm a Kamara owner in very many leagues, and it frustrates me so much to see Alvin Kamara look on the sideline, and here comes Latavius Murray in the game for the next 7 plays. I mean, he was out-touched by Latavius Murray this game. Why is Alvin Kamara not getting 20 touches a game?
Well, I think there's a little overreaction. Kamara's been an absolute stud. He's been the number 1 running back for 90% of the season. I don't know. I just think because when they get up big, they're gonna get Latavius Murray involved. He's a big body, and Kamar's obviously the better pass catcher. I just think this is a kind of a one-off. They're not gonna beat the Bucks that bad every single week. Most other games are gonna be closer, so I don't worry about anything.
What do you do with Emmanuel Sanders now that Michael Thomas has taken away the best cornerback on the opposing defense?
Well,
Maybe drawing some double teams.
I would not start him. There's too many mouths to feed. Kamara and Michael Thomas are just getting fed every game. I don't start him. Even in PPR, I don't start him.
All right, sticking with running backs. What do you do with the Bucks running backs? They were a non-factor in that game last night just because they were down,
Yeah, well,
multiple scores.
I still think you go with Leonard Fournette. I think he's got more value because he's the better pass catcher. For some reason, I mean, maybe that one Ronald Jones fumble last week did it for him, but Bruce Arians loves Leonard Fournette a lot more. I mean, maybe because he's a new toy, wants to use him a lot. I don't know.
All right, and Bucks wide receivers, the talk of the week, it seemed like. How do you rank them?
Well, you managed to pick up Antonio Brown, so I'll ask you, how do you rank them?
I liked what I saw at Antonio Brown. I mean, he had 3 catches, I think. Mike Evans was the main guy there. Chris Godwin, I don't think he was healthy at all. I mean, you could see him look at that. I mean, he was going to the sidelines. That finger bothered him the whole time. I think the statistics were 4 catches for Mike Evans, 3 for Godwin, and 3 for Brown.
Well, we've touched on this before in the other episodes. I think they're all wide receiver 2s with massive upside on each one of them. So, yeah, I think, like I said, wide receiver 2s.
All right, I think that wraps up all the game reviews. You got anything else to add on?
Nah, that's it for episode 3 of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. We appreciate it a lot. Like I said, go check us out on Twitter.
And we'll be back for the Thursday night preview on Thursday, and we'll go over all of our rankings, which will come out Wednesday on the website, and we will also put them out on the Twitter, so be ready for those Wednesday.
Yeah, our Twitter handle is TheFFFanatics3. Check us out, follow us. Spread the word if you like what we're doing. We're trying to grow. We appreciate everybody that's got behind us. Our website is TheFFFanatics.com, as well as our YouTube channel. No, our YouTube channel is The Fantasy Fanatics, right?
Yes, The Fantasy Fanatics.
Go check it out. Drop us a subscription. That's where we put the podcast, and more content will be coming.
Also, drop a like.
Drop a like as well.
You have to drop a like.
We really appreciate it. Keep interacting with the Twitter. We post lots of questions, polls, all that stuff, and we really appreciate it. And until next time, we will catch y'all later.
All right. Peace.